Test one two one two. 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 Test one two. Test one two. Test one two. Welcome to the Baptist Show. Welcome to the Baptist Show. All right, all right, all right, all right. Welcome, 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 warm welcome to you all. There you go. One two one two. Test one two one two. One two test test test. Ma péton légué. Ville ça chaud. Oh oh, ville ça chaud. Ma péton légué. There you go. Ma péton légué. Oh oh, ville ça chaud. Ma péton légué. Welcome to the Baptiste's Show. What a pleasure to be with you guys. Today is actually Tuesday. It's a tremendous pleasure again to be with you all. We're just gonna allow some of our friends to catch up. We do have a good lineup for you for the next 30 minutes. We're gonna be talking about the hurricane and some of the major headline news in the U.S. and across the globe. So it's a lot going on. If you're in the Tampa Bay, Orlando, Central Florida area, we know you're very worried about the hurricane coming through. So we're gonna discuss that a bit. We will be talking about the President Trump indictments and what that means for the United States of America as a whole. Not looking at it through the partisanship lens that many have been looking at it. We are also going to talk to one of our dear friends here, Eddie. Will be joining us. It's gonna be a pleasure. It's gonna be a pleasure. So you guys are in for a treat. So like I said, we're gonna dive right in. So if you see some pauses, it's simply because we are working through it and making sure that we get some of our friends to join in and listen in to the conversations that we'll be having very soon. I say conversations because at the end of the day, that's what this show is about. We want to make sure we have a conversations with folks that are like-minded, folks that see things differently, because we believe there has got to be a safe space for people to have their discords and people to talk things through and talk it out, as opposed to you stay on your side because I don't agree with what you're saying. You're my enemy. We have to stop demonizing one another simply because of our opinions, simply because of our views. And if this podcast, this show can make a difference in that space, then so be it. That's my goal here. We're not here to be partisan. We're not Democrats. We're not Republicans. We're simply humans. It's not a matter of being black, white, yellow, brown. No, it's just being a human being, being a decent human being. Again, being imperfect as well. That's very important, especially in an era in America and the globe where you have to be perfect 24/7. You do not have the luxury to actually not be perfect because one moment of floodness, and then that can destroy everything you've ever built, everything you've ever worked for. So again, this is a safe space for those kind of conversations. Whereas again, we might disagree on the topic at hand, but that doesn't mean we are enemies for the rest of our lives or anything like that. It used to be at one point where people could be cordial to one another, even if they disagree deep down about politics, religion, and so many other things. But we are seeing things ramping up over the last few years. So again, we're gonna check in here with some of our friends and making sure that everything is working on the other end. This podcast is just the work of one man, so we're not gonna pretend we're in a big time studio where we have um, you know 10 for 10 50 people working behind the scene here. This is something that we do for you to provide you a different voice, to provide you a different take, a different perspective on some of the headlines that you're hearing out there, and probably talking about them differently than the mainstream media is. So that's what this podcast, this vlog, this show is all about. The name is Roberto Batiste. Always a pleasure to join you. We'll be here 10 to 11:30 every morning for during the weekdays. So obviously during the holidays we're not gonna be here. In case of an emergency, we're not gonna be here either. What a way to start this show uh, with actual potential hurricane here coming to our shores in Central Florida. Just so you guys know, I am in Orlando, Florida. So I'm gonna read to you some of the news that's coming out with regards to this hurricane here, and then we're gonna try to dissect it a little bit. Much of Florida is in disaster mode on Tuesday, with only hours to go before an onslaught from Idalia, forecast to strengthen rapidly into an extremely dangerous major hurricane before hitting the Gulf Coast on Wednesday. Florida residents loaded up sandbags and evacuated from homes in low-lying areas along the Gulf Coast to prepare for a storm that the National Hurricane Center projected could have sustained winds of up to 120 miles per hour. That would make it a Category 3 hurricane, a potentially big blow to a state still dealing with lingering damages from last year's Hurricane Ian. Governor DeSantis stated, "You still have time this morning to make your final preparations, but you got to do that now. He announced a state of emergency, set up the operation center. Obviously, he waived the tolls also, and we have somewhat of an idea of the shelters that are in place as well, while also activating 30,000 utility workers or so. Again, we'll be dissecting that, talking to you guys, and see where your head is at this particular moment here. So that's extremely important, right? Hurricane Idalia, Category 3 hurricane. That's nothing to play around with. So bear with us. Again, we will be dissecting this here shortly. You're watching the Baptist Show. Again, we are talking about Hurricane Idalia. So that's going to be a handful for folks here in Central Florida. We get it. It's not easy living in Central Florida, living in disaster areas, but we must do what we must do at this point. What choice do we have, right? All right, guys. So let's talk about the hurricane situation in the state of Florida. It is never a good time for a hurricane to hit shore and really disrupt your entire life. One thing that I'll say to you guys, take it seriously. It doesn't matter if it's a category one, category two, a category three hurricane. You know what driving down the highway 70 mile per hour feels like, looks like. Imagine 120 mile per hour. That's a category three hurricane winds coming at you. So again, please take the warning seriously. If you're in one of those evacuation zones for the state of Florida, make sure you do so, especially if you're in the Gulf Coast area, the Tampa Bay area as well, as we are seeing the hurricane battling down and heading that way right now. So it's extremely important that you do listen to the authorities, you do listen to Governor DeSantis and his staff, the emergency management personnel that are setting up camps right now to prepare for this hurricane. In a hurricane situation, keep in mind you have the preparedness, which means you're preparing for the hurricane, you're boarding your house from a personal standpoint, you are rationing supply or acquiring supply rather, and making sure that you have enough water. One thing for sure you want to have is enough water for you and your family. Well, what is enough water? At least 2, 3 gallons per person, so that you can survive on that for 3 days, they say. But you want to make sure you have enough water for everyone for at least 5 to 7 days, because if you are sheltering in place, you want to make sure that you have the basic necessities. You need to have water, wipes, canned goods, and of course, the healthcare or medical kit just in case of an emergency, so you can look after your family. Those are very, very important, at least the basic necessities. One thing that I'll also say, it's not time to panic or go to the stores and start buying in bulk things that you do not really need. So you want to go out there, you want to prepare, you want to make sure your family is safe at the end of the day. So that's the bottom line. but that's the personal level side of it. When you look at the state itself, the state of Florida and the emergency management personnel, conveying the information, providing you with the information, that's the key. So when you're at home, you want to know what's going on because a hurricane changes path very quickly at times. If you are from Florida, you remember a few years back when we had another hurricane that was supposed to be headed to Tampa and then last minute kind of veered towards Orlando and made sustainable damages here in Orlando. So that's never a good thing. That is why whenever there's a hurricane, you have to take it seriously. You have to listen to the authorities and make sure that you're following or adhering to what they're asking you to do. We'll be monitoring the hurricane here on our end, so please make sure that you're doing what, again, the authorities are asking you to do because at the end of the day, we want you to stay safe. We want you to make sure that your family stays safe as well. If you have any questions, please let us know. Again, we are here for you because it's a situation that can be very challenging both mentally and physically. But being from Florida, we kind of get used to um, dealing with hurricanes, so that builds in the type of complacency that you don't want to be creeping in when it comes to it. I mean, if you're here from 2001 onward, like 2004, hurricane season was pretty terrible. I think '06 or '07 was pretty bad as well. When we had back-to-back hurricane, I believe it was in 2006 when you had the Gulf Coast being battered severely, and Hurricane Gene hit around that same time as well. So it was like three different hurricanes. Yeah, if you survive those and you've lived through them, kind of I've seen it all. No, you haven't, because Mother Nature is Mother Nature. So you got to take every single warning very, very seriously. So at the end of the day, it's your safety and your family safety. Government or anyone else can never give you your life back. So you got to make sure you have life to keep doing the other things that you have to do. That's our take on the hurricane coming down. Obviously, we'll be monitoring things and then we'll keep you updated here because we're talking about a Category 3 hurricane. This is not a joke. This is not something to take lightly. So please make sure you proceed with caution here and you do get the sandbags if you need it. You do get the proper supplies to keep you and your family safe, obviously. You're watching the Baptiste Show. The podcast is for you and your listening pleasure. We've moving on because we are here now, just a couple of days after the brutal killings of three folks in the Jacksonville area. Three people that woke up on Saturday. They didn't know it was going to be their last day. So unfortunately, these poor folks were the victim of a brutal act of violence by one individual who had some very distorted views and beliefs as well. Why do we say distorted? Well, at the end of the day, the political climate in our country here in America have been boiling, to say the least here. As a result, there's a lot of anger on multiple fronts. There's a lot of hate that's been building. I'm not gonna look at this from the same vantage point that everyone else is looking at it, where this is a racist attack. We all know the facts are the facts, and the individual in question put his vile thoughts and beliefs out there in the three manifestos that he left behind. Who does that? Aside from a sick individual, I don't know. But let's look at it from the general standpoint of why some of the black community leaders are upset with Governor DeSantis. A lot of them are saying basically that Governor DeSantis has created and pushed a narrative of division and hate that is anti-black in Florida. If you recall, Governor DeSantis is one of the few that has been pushing for local school boards to be headed by individuals that share some of his beliefs that there is a certain re-education of American history that needs to be done, whereas something should be excluded. And some of those thoughts went as far as saying that, well, slaves benefited from slavery, whereas they learned some skills from slavery. Well, at the end of the day, I would love to ask Governor DeSantis what the heck were you thinking, man? I mean, that's just the bottom line. And I think if he's an honest individual, he would want to take that one back because I don't think someone as smart as DeSantis would ever express himself like that in public. Whether it's for pondering, whether it's for votes, I doubt it. I think it was on a slip up on his part. But again, politicians these days, instead of walking back a statement, they would rather double down. But that being said, when you create that kind of rhetoric, it's very convenient for deranged individuals, sick individuals out there to latch onto your vile rhetorics and use that as the catalyst, as the fuel to really explode. Like we always see, there's always a last event that pushes people to the brink to commit some kind of act of violence. So again, Governor DeSantis, fair or not, he's getting a lot of the blame for the anti-black sentiments that is growing prevalent in the state of Florida. And I would even go further to say not just anti-black based on what some of those folks were saying, or it's just anti-minorities, period, because this is the same governor that kind of tried to drive a lot of Hispanics out of the state of Florida to some of the legislations, whereas Hispanics felt they were not welcome. Some might venture to say, well, no, he's targeting illegal immigration, so on and so forth, but that's not how it was perceived by the Hispanic community that's always felt welcome in the state of Florida. Again, fair or not, that's what's on the table. That's the discussion. So now let's go back to the act itself, because this is one of those where you cannot pretend and say, well, maybe the shooter didn't mean this, didn't mean that. Well, the shooter spoke for himself because he wrote those manifestos and actually left behind a trail of bad thoughts as to why he killed those three innocent people. Imagine, and this is what we don't do enough, I feel, in this country, putting on the other person's shoes. Imagine waking up on a bright Saturday morning with your family. You decide to go do some shopping. As you're driving, maybe you wanted a couple of items, and you say, you know what, I think I should walk into a Dollar General. You walk into a Dollar General, and this is the last time you walk into a store because some deranged individual decided, well, this Dollar General is frequented by a lot of black people. Let me go in and at least kill a few of those folks. The sad part is this wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last time. That's the sad part. That means if you're Jewish, we've seen it in the Jewish community where folks went to pray and they didn't get a chance to make it back home because some deranged individual decided they were going to act on their hatred and take the lives of innocent people. Imagine again whether you're white, Christian, Muslim, whatever creed, whatever you identify with, that those were your last moment. You didn't do anything wrong. You just decided to go shopping with your family. Just imagine that for a moment. And somehow, some individual that you know nothing of, that you have no idea who that person is, just walk in and start shooting at you simply because of how they perceive a certain race to be. That's the issue at hand here. That somehow these attacks are becoming more and more prevalent in our society. Yet, politicians on both sides, by the way, not just DeSantis, because sometimes I feel some folks from the left actually latch on too hard on some of those things and they dial up the rhetorics even more rather than try to tone it down. So, yes, we can blame some of it on DeSantis, Governor DeSantis here, but the political atmosphere have created this environment now where, again, instead of those hashtag warriors like we used to say back then when social media first appeared, well, now those folks are in the streets now, acting on those thoughts, on those feelings, which pushed me to my point here. Are people becoming more violent in America because they feel they are suppressed in expressing their thoughts? When we were creating the concept for this Baptiste'S Show, we didn't want to do something that's out there already. We wanted to do something different, but borrowing from what's been done before. The recurring theme when doing research that I kept finding was that there's a lot of anger from both people on the left, people on the right, that we're living in a time where you cannot express dissent, you cannot express yourself without being canceled, without being mislabeled, without being chastised at the end of the day. Make no mistakes. There's no excuse for that kind of act of violence, of hatred. There's no excuse for that. But at some point as a society, we have to move beyond the punchline, the hashtags, the different hashtag movements. And we have to get to the roots of it. The shootings that you're seeing, the acts of violence that you're seeing are symptoms of a much bigger disease. If we're going to diagnose this, we ought to have those tough conversations and really get to the roots of it. Now, don't get me wrong, America always had acts of violence, but they're becoming more and more frequent every single day. So I ask again the question, are people feelings of their free speech being suppressed contributing to the rise in the acts of violence we're seeing in America today? Now, if someone is saying some vile things about, well, black folks do this, Asian folks do that, and immigrants are coming here to steal our jobs and everything else, do I agree with it? Absolutely not, unequivocally not. But if that's how the individual feel, I'm going to ask you as the general public here, wouldn't you want to know that Tom or Harry from down the streets, that's how he feels? Now, if we can have a cordial conversations where you might try to debate these feelings, these thoughts, these notions or misconceived notions from that individual, yeah, that's fine. You can have that conversation. But at some point, I'd rather be informed of your views than walking into a Dollar General, unbeknown to me, that you decide to take my life. The parallel here again is there's a rampant rhetoric from politicians that are trying to get votes. Elections are about one thing only: getting most votes than your opponent, or more votes than your opponent. We know that. At times we think politicians will never scoop this low, but they will, because again, their job is to win, and they will win at all costs. We've seen that in the American political arena. So we know politicians are not going to change overnight. But we as a society, what can we do to start impacting real changes in America? I'm not going to be able to change Tom's and Harry's views on race relations in this country. That is not going to happen. However, my question is this: can we go back to a time where Tom and Harry feel like they can express themselves without being shunned by society? Now, don't get me wrong. There have got to be consequences for some of the vile rhetorics that you attribute, or you own up to, or you put in the public sphere. At times, does that mean you might end up losing your job? Yeah, absolutely. When company values don't align with your personal values, you leave the place of work, right? So why do you think if you on social media saying how much you despise Muslim, or how much you despise the Jewish folks out there, or how much you despise black people or Asian people, well, there's going to be some consequences, because most companies are not going to align themselves with those kind of values of yours. So you have to actually take ownership of that if you're on that kind of rant on social media. But what I'm saying ultimately is this: should that person be so oppressed in their minds, that is, whether it's real or fiction, that's how they are feeling. Again, putting yourself in other people's shoes. Should that person be so oppressed in their mind that they feel their only resort now is violence, then I believe we've failed as a democracy. We've failed as a society. Because no individual living in America should ever feel that they cannot express themselves freely. Again, I did not say without consequences. There will be some consequences for expressing yourself. Freedom of speech is not so free after all. We all know that. Just like your actions are not, you're not so free to espouse free will and do whatever you want. That's life. But have we become such a perfect society that no amount of discord is tolerated in the public sphere or public arena? I remember some friends when candidate Trump back then was running for office in 2015. They were telling me that they could not even say out loud they were considering to vote for candidate Trump back then. Again, we're not in the whether right or wrong business here. We're in the business of when did it become okay for us to not be able to express ourselves? Keep in mind, these United States of America never banned swastikas. That's the Hitler signs here. We never banned it, even after World War II, when we defeated the Germans, when we lost so many white, black, Asian, so many of our soldiers that fought for us. We never, never, never banned it. People could use that to express themselves. Here's a funny plot twist for you. Germany banned that, and all symbols of the Nazi party and the Hitler regime after World War II, Germany banned all that. We as a society never did. Imagine that for a moment. Now, again, am I saying I agree, I disagree? That's not the point. The point is people were able to express themselves. We've created a more dangerous land when we are suppressing free speech. That's my thoughts. That's my idea here that I want us to discuss at some point. You have got to give people the platform to express themselves. Again, at least you will know where they stand. When they can't do that, they either go underground or they go on a rampage. I don't want that. Because when people go underground, that's when they start building networks. And eventually, when they pop up, violence follows. Some decide to act as lone wolves, as we've seen over the past few years. So, my thoughts on this again, we are blaming Governor DeSantis' rhetorics for some of these actions. Right or wrong, that's for you to decide. But he has something to do with it. The left has a lot to do with it. Because, again, both the left and the right of this country, when it comes to politicians, all they want to do is win elections, get votes. That's the job, right? So, when are we going to blame ourselves? What do I mean by that? As a society, when are we going to accept that we need more free speech in this country? You're watching the Baptiste's Show. We just discussed the killings in Jacksonville. May the souls of those 3 individuals that were lost rest in peace. Our country deserves better. They deserve better. It's rather unfortunate. This is where America is headed. Let's see if we can jump right in and try to get a hold of our guest for today. I'm wondering if Eddie is ready to talk to us. So we're gonna make sure that we send Eddie an invitation here so he can join us shortly. We're watching the Baptist Show. Always a pleasure to be with you guys. It's been one of those very tough weekend here in Florida, and on top of it, now we are preparing for Hurricane Idalia, which is a hurricane category 3, heading straight for us here in Florida. Let us know your thoughts, by the way. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. Please make sure you follow us on social media, Baptiste Show. That's the handle at Baptiste Show. Baptiste, Baptiste, S, and then you have Show, SHOW, one word. Baptiste with an S, and then Show, SHOW. That's the handle for Instagram, Facebook, and of course YouTube. Right. So, guys, this is what's going on in terms of race relation in America. But this is not just it. Chapel Hill, we saw a graduate student charged with murder. Remember the Colorado shooting in the supermarket? It goes on and on and on. The list goes on and on. So we just have to make sure that we do better. That's all we can do. Bear with us. We'll be with you shortly here again as we try to get a hold of our guest for the day. You're watching the Baptiste Show. Always a pleasure to be with you guys. Again, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Other news, let's talk about what's going on in the Republican Party. As we know it, the Republican Party, the Republican Party's primary is going on full swing. Recently, they had their first debate. You have a lot of contenders to replace President Trump, and President Trump himself, as you know, is running. So that's always one thing about President Trump. You're gonna get your entertainment. That's one thing about him. No matter what's going on in his life, you're gonna get your source of entertainment from him. So we'll discuss that in a moment. Right before we jump in for the last 30 minutes with our guest here, Eddie, that should be queuing to join us. Eddie, are you on? I'm doing good, my friend. How are you? Brother, thank you very much. Let's make sure that everything is lined up so we get you showing live as well. So just make sure we cue everything for you because I know your perspective is really needed in some of the debate that we have going on. And with this hurricane coming on, there's so much we need to talk about. I wonder if 30 minutes is going to be enough for us, Eddie. That's it. That's it. Right? Got you. Got you. All right, Eddie. I don't know what's going on. If you can start your video for me, I just requested it again, but it's just not coming on for whatever reason. Okay. Folks, you're watching the Baptist Show. We have the great pleasure of having Eddie O with us, one of our good friends here. What a pleasure to have Eddie here. Hey Eddie, thanks for answering the call, man. Truly appreciate you. So let's jump right into it before we even go into the Republican primaries, right? So let's talk about the hurricane, man. You have water, you boarding up. What's going on with you? Because I know you're in Florida as well. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. 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 No, absolutely, Eddie, and thank you for that. Because at the end of the day, I was telling folks here, no one can give you your life back, so you got to make sure you're safe. Preparedness means boarding up the home, making sure you have the right amount of supplies, and I think Eddie is on the same sphere that I am. Normally, we have everything in terms of water and everything else, because if you live in Florida, those basic necessities you got to have them around the house, so we don't panic and just go at that point to the store. But if you didn't, it's time to go. There's still some water at the store. I know Eddie joked about it's a stimuli for the economy. It is, but if you're missing those items, please do get them. And at the end of the day, we don't know where it's gonna land exactly, so somebody's gonna get impacted, as Eddie mentioned. Eddie, with regards to hurricane, I know you've been in Florida for a minute. Which one was like the worst one for you? Your worst experience with hurricane here since you've been in Florida? Oof, yeah. Mhm. I think that was crazy too. Yeah, yeah. Replace. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's well said. But for me, one of the worst ones that I had, I think it was which one was it? It was Andrews. Yeah, Andrews was terrible. Andrews was terrible. But we were in a command center, and then the place started flooding in the middle of the hurricane, so we had to move some of the sandbags in like 20 mile, 30 mile per hour wind. So that was just the outer band. But when you're out there in that rain and then the wind and the rain is hitting your face and you're trying to hold on to a rope just to move sandbags, that was like the dumbest thing we've ever done. But we survived it. So, right? Like I said, some of the dumbest things you'll ever do in your life, but you learn to be appreciative, and it is what it is. But Eddie, moving on, experience, you got to put it in that box, right? You can't just hold on too much to it. Eddie, before we dive into the Republican primaries and the candidates and whatnot, I don't know if you were listening in when we were talking about this notion that in this country today, folks cannot express dissent. So if Eddie and I would disagree on politics, would disagree on the time of day, well, Eddie becomes my arch rival and enemy, and I shall never speak of the name Eddie anymore. And in my opinion, I believe that's contributed to the uptick in violence that's been going on in this country. You have a rise in a lot of the violence that, yeah, it happened before. Every now and then you heard of a killing at a church or something of that effect. But I feel lately it's becoming more and more prevalent because it seems there is no safe space to free speech anymore, where free speech is kind of like disappearing. So I don't know your thoughts on that, but that's kind of what we were discussing prior. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. Not that I can recall, no. Hmm. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hmm. 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 No. No. Hmm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, Eddie. But here's the thing though with our society right now. You're saying a lot of things that are common sense that make sense or what have you. But America is so divided today. We can't even agree on having background checks, universal background checks on folks buying guns. It's so silly that in the state of Florida, you if you go in to buy a handgun, right, you have to wait a certain amount of days before you get the weapon. However, if you go and you buy a AK-47 or M16, you call it assault rifle, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna name the weapon. You can walk out of the store that day with it. It's just so happened they tell you you cannot buy a certain amount of ammunition, but what's stopping you from going to the guns store next door and buy gun shows or the gun store next door and buy a bunch of ammunition? Again, if you're a responsible gun owner and you think this is directed towards you, I mean, come on, man, you're just being stupid and uh, thin skin. That's what we're talking about. If you're a responsible gun owner, this is not pertaining to you. We could care less how many weapons you own. You can own 10,000. You're a responsible gun owner. You're never gonna commit an act of violence. When you disagree with Eddie, you actually invite Eddie to go have a beer. This conversation has nothing to do with you, Eddie. I have to scream this because somehow there's gonna be someone that says this and like, oh, they're advocating to take a gun. No, stupid, we are not. Eddie told you I was an avid gun owner as well. Trust me, we know. But at the end of the day, Eddie's bringing up something that's valid. When are we gonna look at common sense approach to gun ownership? I think Japan, Eddie, has a law where you have to qualify with the weapon on a yearly basis. You have to have a psych eval attached every 3 years or something like that. I think Chris Rock joked about it that when you make ammunition more expensive than the gun itself, you're gonna reduce gun violence in this country. But I don't know, man. I don't know what it's gonna take, but the divide is so real. Can we even ever have a conversation about that kind of stuff? Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the key. Putting other people's shoes on. We fail to do that often enough. Whereas I'm not in Eddie's shoes. I don't have to know how Eddie feels because just now you've expressed yourself in a way that anyone with a lick of common sense can sit down and say, "Well, this guy's a gun owner. He's a gun enthusiast, and he's talking about how do we do have some kind of reform. But I don't want to lose us in the rabbit hole here, Eddie, because unfortunately, the moment you start talking about gun reform, the violent part is left out. People forget why we started the conversation. Uh, Going back, I think that can help. Absolutely, I agree with you on that. But do you feel the relationship you just mentioned with your neighbor? That's the relationship I have with so many other friends. We grew up differently as well, where we grew up with very thick skin. If you don't have thick skin, how we grew up back then, I don't think you would have made it. Somebody's always making fun of you. You're always joking, even your shortcomings or fair games. That's just the way it was for you to grow up with thick skin. Do you think that the shift in our societal norms on how people are growing up is now contributing to a lot more of those mental health issues that you're talking about, a lot more of the acting out part of it, because you have young people that were growing up, and some of us were raising the alarm bell that, yeah, these guys are very thin skinned, they take everything personally and everything else. Do you think now that these folks are turning into adults, when they cannot be heard, their next step is I'm gonna use violence to be heard? Do you think that that's a contributing factor to it? No. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To get the lesson. Yeah. 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 Come on, let's drop this, right? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Yes, sir. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Eddie, you touch up on so many things, and I just want to give you this one anecdotal story here. I have two kids. The joke I heard the joke before I had kids that if you have one job, you're a parent, and then if you have two, you're a referee, and that's just the bottom line because you're constantly refereeing between the two. Well, no, you're wrong, you're right, and what have you. But the day that I decided to start telling these kids, you need to fix it between you two. If I get involved, everybody's gonna lose. The day that I decided to use that method was the best day ever because oftentimes they attempt to resolve their issues before they get to me. If it gets to me, then it's really a bad day in the office that it has to get to me. But when you think about it, I'm not the smartest. I'm not, whatever. But it's just conflict resolution. It starts at home. If that's not taught at home, when I get into the workplace, Eddie tells me, go pound sand, you're new, I don't have to go with your idea. It's not because Eddie doesn't like me. Well, Eddie just told me the reason why he doesn't want to go with my idea. I have to go, Eddie, you told me why. What can I do to perhaps convince you? If Eddie go tell me to go pound sand somewhere, and then maybe find another leader later to help you. But it shouldn't be Eddie's now on my blacklist. I don't like the terms. That's the term that they use here in America for it. Eddie's on my blacklist. I'm gonna come back for Eddie the next day, the day after. You know what? Once I lose this job, I lost this job because of Eddie, and then now I'm gonna use a weapon and come after Eddie. When it doesn't happen at home early enough, I feel kids don't go outside and play enough. So when they do go outside and play, they are overly protected by both parents and coaches because now you have a I got to win at all costs coach. Instead of teaching those conflict resolution, they never pick it up anywhere. They end up in college where now their views are being challenged. Because if you go to college, you don't expect your views to be challenged. I don't know what you were doing in college. Okay? So as a result now, they start acting out. We don't have all the solutions, people, but we are trying to touch upon the different pain points here to let you know that we need to do better. Raising our kids, we need to do better, understanding one another, putting other people's shoes on, because at the end of the day, this journey is best lived when you have neighbors as opposed to enemies. And that's kind of like the overarching thought that I have, Eddie. I don't know if you have anything else on that. Mm-hmm. 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 Books up, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 But Eddie, hold on a second though. You said you have the U.S. flags, but how many of those Civil War flags that we have there, though, the Confederate flags? I'm just messing around. I'm just messing around. Yeah. 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 Right. What does that take away from you? Thank you. Thank you. Eddie, hold on. Before we go further, I got to give you this anecdotal story, right? And that was back in 2009, 2010. I'm driving the back roads of Winter Haven areas, right? I kid you not. It was Confederate flag, Honduras flag, Mexican flag, Confederate flag. Dora's flag, Mexican flag, Confederate flag. And I started laughing. I said, man, the backwoods of Winter Haven and Haines City are like the United Nations. And I think these people get along great. They have no issues with one another. But sometimes overthinking things and taking those symbols, like you telling someone you don't have the right to fly your Confederate flag. Well, that's his prerogative, man. Let him fly his flag. I'm pretty sure if you're from Irish American descent, Italian American descent, you have one of those flags. No one can tell you on your private property not to fly it. That's your prerogative. That's your business. Again, that's where we go back to the free speech aspect. I would rather know than not know. My grandfather used to say, Eddie, he doesn't care if a courtyard has some mean dogs in it. What he wants to know is that there are some mean dogs that are there. A, he doesn't want to go in, or if he's gonna go in, he's gonna prepare himself to go in. And that's the way I see things as well. Don't you want to know who your neighbors are? If your neighbors are welcoming people, they just have some great 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 grandfather that fought in the Civil War, they're proud of him. You want to know that. That's completely fine. You don't want to just assume, well, my neighbor has this Confederate flag. He's like, the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Come on, man. Like, really? But go ahead, Eddie. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. So the stronger the individual, the stronger the community ultimately, right? No, I agree with you, Eddie. And one last point on this, and the free speech notion as well. I remember back in 1994 when the U.S. Went to Haiti to restore democracy, meaning bringing back democracy. They had this infomercial on TV right before the first democratically held elections there at the time, where they were trying to explain democracy to the average Haitian person, and they were saying democracy, by definition, is where your rights begins, where somebody else's rights ends, basically. So if you translate that in simpler terms, if Eddie's neighbor is not taking away any of his rights, why should Eddie take away that neighbor's rights? And I think oftentimes that's what we're forgetting in this day and age. Eddie saying some crazy stuff with his mouth doesn't take away anything from me. Eddie can call me whatever he wants. I'm gonna call Eddie whatever I want back. But now when Eddie decides to put hands on me, that's a different story. Do you understand? So I think those notions, and I bring that back, Eddie, because those notions that we try to teach societies that are experimenting democracy for the first decade or the first few years, I think maybe we need to have some of those infomercial play on national television here or in America and teach people again what it means to live in a democracy. Again, I don't have to agree with your speech. I don't have to accept your speech, but I'm not going to prevent you from speaking your truth. Too often in America today, people want to speak their truth and prevent others from doing the same. And the moment we cannot understand we all have a right to free speech, and when we take that right away from others, it's going to escalate into something nastier and that we cannot control, then we're in big trouble in this democratic democracy experiment that we're still doing. No. Eddie, I gotta say this joke, man. I gotta say this joke. See, this is the problem as black men that we have to put that at the end of everything we just said because we don't want to be mislabeled as un-American. But damn, I am as American as they come. Eddie's as American as they come. We value and cherish this country. That's why we're giving you your our honest viewpoint. That's why we're giving you an unfiltered viewpoint. Just so you know, Eddie shouldn't have to add that last bit in. But unfortunately, we have to in this day and age because somebody somewhere, Eddie, might see this clip and then they do their edit and say, look at these two un-American black guys questioning this country. No, it's because we're Americans. It's because we believe in this country. That is why we're trying to give you the lens of let people speak their truth and let's live and let live. We might have a better chance at this. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Different beast, different ball game. Yeah, yeah. I agree, brother. Eddie, we don't even have time to dive into the Republican Party. I don't want to commit you to it, especially with a hurricane coming here tomorrow. We got to dive into the primaries of the Republican Party where President Trump is whooping butt, leading 30 plus points that pack. So tomorrow we're going to dissect this. Hopefully there is no hurricane hitting us hard here in Orlando. We'll do so. We'll come here tomorrow and do so. Right, fingers crossed. You're not breaking that cape again. Linda's gonna kill you if you do. Guys, I hope we give you the edit. And yeah, we definitely gonna make sure that we share that video once with our audience here. Eddie in a cape trying to save Brooksville, and his wife wanted to murder him when he put that cape in the middle of a hurricane. That was insane. That was insane, brother. Good fun. Good fun. Your time. Absolutely. Brother, thank you so much. Any last words before possibly tomorrow where we dive deeper into the Republican primary race? Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate having you on, man. Likewise, brother. Likewise. All right, guys. That was the Baptist Show. What a pleasure to have you guys watch this show live. Having Eddie on, always a wealth of knowledge and perspective. So you guys are in for a treat. Uh, Understand again that hurricanes is serious business. For Category 3, please be safe. Please make sure that you guys have the appropriate supplies to keep your family safe for days on in case that things get really bad. Because again, we talk about the preparedness, the mitigation factors, or meaning you just have to wait it out. You got to ride it out and make sure that you're good. And then based on the amount of damages, you're gonna get in the recovery phase, and you help your case by actually taking pictures, excuse me, of the status of your home before the hurricane. So if you haven't done that, make sure you do, because for insurance purposes, let's say your roof, the roof is affected, or you have some flood situation and whatnot, you need to make sure you have those pre-hurricane pictures and then the post-hurricane pictures. So make sure you do that for recovery purposes. This is again the Baptiste Show. We come here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. till 11:30 a.m. with your host Roberto Baptiste. We had Eddie O with us today. Always a pleasure to come into your homes. You could have listened to any other shows, but you decided to give us an hour or so of your life today. So we thank you very much for that, and we look forward to you subscribing, sharing, and telling your friends about us. Again, be safe. Make sure that you ride out this hurricane safely until we see you next time. Thank you, guys.